All right, guys. Today's episode, our guest today is Carrie Farrell. Really looking forward to talking with Carrie. She, besides being a coach and a counselor, she's also a mom and a podcaster for the Training the Complete Athlete podcast. And so, looking forward to talking with Carrie about the different ways that courage shows up in those different areas, and excited, especially to encourage and inspire you if you have kids in your family or athletes. We're going to talk about the unique challenges that athletes and families are having these days. So, welcome to the podcast, Carrie.
I'm excited to be on this side of the questions. I'm always the one asking and writing the questions, so I'm excited to actually get to answer them for a
Yes,
change.
yes. I started listening to your podcast. I love the energy that you have with your guests. So I know this is going to be a great episode. Great time to talk with you. So, like to ask you to start with sharing your background.
So my background has been in athletics. I grew up in a small town, and pretty much you played sports, and that's about all you did. And I was a very serious, very focused kid. And all I wanted to do was play Division I sports. And the dream came true. I played at the University of Utah. I got a full ride scholarship, so what everybody dreams of. And it was a great fit for me. It was definitely a good match being at Utah. But I actually ended my career early. I had two spinal fusions in the same year, end of my sophomore year and beginning of my junior year, and I did not heal the way that was supposed to happen. And I was super blessed because University of Utah is across the street from three major hospitals, and
Mm,
they're kind of on the front line of medicine. So I had the best care. I was so spoiled. I had pretty much a medical team taking care of me, and I got the best of the best, but my body just didn't heal in
mm.
the way that it was supposed to.
Wow.
So yeah, so
Well,
that was, so my career ended short, but I always knew I wanted to be a collegiate coach. So I kind of went into the coaching world earlier than planned, as kind of an undergrad assistant. And then I stayed at the University of Utah for 2 years as an assistant coach before returning to the Northwest. But my chronic pain followed me.
mm,
So that's one of the reasons I didn't stay at the Division I level, is because I couldn't keep up with the schedule physically. You're on the road constantly, long days at the ballpark, high stress job. And I just knew my body wasn't going to be able to handle that. And live a normal life, live a regular life.
yeah. So, I'm assuming sports and training from when you were little, and then just halfway through your career cut short.
Mm.
How was that? The end of that dream, or the
It,
change in your
it's
plans.
it's funny because athletes don't talk about the end of their careers. I think we do a better job of doing it now. It's become a much more common topic, but nobody ever talked about retirement or injury. It's not like we were all going to play forever.
Mm,
Everybody retires at some point from playing their sport, even the professionals. But
right.
for me, softball was the most important thing, second only to God and family. Like, yeah, I was a good student. I would say, yeah, school is really important, but let's be real. Like, I majored in softball. That's what I wanted to do. And for that to disappear, it like totally kind of destroyed my world. And it
Mm,
was funny. I think this was kind of got my foot into the world of counseling before I ever really planned on it. I went through a series of depression, and nobody talked about that either. So I went to our sports psychologist, and we had one of the best sports psychologists in probably in the world. He was working with USA Track. So I mean, USA Track is kind of the gold standard for track and field. And I went to him, I said, I think I'm depressed. And he looked at me, and he was like this huge guy. And he goes, yeah, I don't do depression. And I go, then what do you do? And
mm,
he's like, well, I do performance. So I was this athlete in one of the worst parts of my career with nobody as guiding of how can I help you, right?
yeah.
So I actually went to my team doctor who I'd been with for a long time. And I said, I think I'm depressed. And she started laughing at me. And I was like, you got to be kidding me that you're laughing at me. And I just kind of looked at her. She goes, it's about time. You've been going through all of this for 2 years.
Mm,
And I bounced around to different counselors, and then I hit the mother load, and I met this guy. His name is Steve Veracek. I'm still in touch with him 20 years later.
mm.
And he was a former athlete that was injured who just happened to be a therapist. And so I
Okay.
started seeing him,
Yeah.
and that changed
He
my whole
he
view on
he
counseling.
he got it.
He got it
He
100%.
understood what you were going
Yes.
through.
Yeah.
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 And like Carrie, the not because of injury off at college, but I am guessing our high school athletes or even middle school athletes
Mhm.
are experiencing this with shutting down and not being able to play a full schedule,
Mhm.
not being able to play football,
Mhm.
or any of the sports right now. Um, are you working with teams or athletes right now?
So my primary focus is working with athletes ranging, I have an 11-year-old client that is a high level gymnast. I work from, as I say, up to professional, so kind of across the board. And so many of them are struggling, even the ones that are training right now. I'm on the FCA board for the University of Oregon, and so I'm always checking in on athletes down there. And the lockdown on them is so severe, like they literally just go to a field and they go back to a hotel. They can't
Mm.
intermingle. It's really
They're
hard
in a
for them.
bubble, like the
Yeah, I
NBA
mean, yeah,
bubble.
they're like, yeah, I mean, to the utmost. And so to watch these kids, they get to go back to play, but there's all this stress around what they get to play, right? And the kids that are just getting back, like it's a whole different experience, right? It's just like these kids returning back to school. So many of my clients are afraid to go back to school. It's not because of COVID. They're not afraid about getting sick. Most of them aren't. They don't know how to be social anymore. They don't
Right.
know what their talent is anymore. They've had a
Mm.
year off, right? So even in the recruiting world, I'll say to a coach and say, "Oh man, this kid's going to be amazing," and they're like, "Well, we'll see." I'm like, "What do you mean we'll see?" And they're like, "It's been a year." I literally was going to a little league tryout
Yeah.
before I came to talk to you. And that was the conversation of, most of these kids haven't done much of any of this. And
Mm.
so returning back is overwhelming.
So
And the
much
kid,
pressure.
so much pressure. And these kids actually have gotten a glimpse of what life is like without sport. And it's scary for them.
Yeah.
Plus,
Yeah.
this is what they use to blow off steam and kind of use as a distraction from the stressors of their life.
Right.
And it's disappeared. And everybody wants to blame COVID for all the mental health stuff going on. Do I think COVID's part of the problem? Yes, but I really think COVID has magnified all the stuff that was there because we can't avoid it anymore.
Yes.
It's all in our homes, right?
Yeah. My daughter, she's a junior, and she was saying mental health issues like depression or like social anxiety and awkwardness and things like that. Um, with school and being with your friends, orchestra.
Mhm.
She used to do orchestra. My older kids did musical theater.
Mhm.
When you have something to have fun and connect with, blow off steam, be active, like uh, you know, just school from home, not having that,
No.
it just she said, like, you didn't have those distractions anymore. You had to face your emotions
Mhm.
that are there.
And that's one of the biggest things I really encourage people is find something to do. And everybody's like, "But I'm on lockdown," right? And I'm like, "Okay, but for me, I was on lockdown. I don't sit very well. I always have 100 projects going on, and I had to decide, okay, what am I going to use this extra time for?" So for me, it was like, okay, you're really going to focus on getting your podcast really, rocking and rolling. And I got through my second season, and then once that was done, it was another project, right? So I couldn't just sit and let this time pass. Now I
Mm.
know when you're 16, 17, time doesn't seem so important as when you're middle-aged, but I didn't want to get through COVID and go, oh, there's nothing going on. And a lot of the people that I'm working with, their depression is so significant because they don't have something to do. And going through seminary, one of my professors always said you needed something to believe in, someone to love, and something to do. And a lot of my clients don't have any of those, or they're missing at least one. And usually it's the
Yeah.
something to do. And it's interesting when you say about musical theater. So I'm actually I'm actually raising a theater nerd. Now she is a self-proclaimed theater nerd. I would not call her that, but that's what she
Right.
calls herself.
Oh no,
And
they
I
love they
oh, they
love it.
love it, right?
They love it.
And my
They'll
and
sing
my
you a
son is
song.
an athlete, so I'm raising two different kiddos, but they've been
Mm.
able to be in school because they go to private school. But without Grace having her theater group, it's the same thing. I can't even imagine her functioning without her COVID theater group, right? And they still been able to do things online and connect, because without that, we feel just this gaping hole in who we are. Especially, as I say, it's part of the big identity. I'm an actor, I'm an athlete. As an athlete, when I met people, that was the first thing I would ever say. I would never say I'm a child of God, I'm a daughter. Even now, like, i'm
Mm.
not i'm not even a coach anymore. I mean, like, I don't coach collegiately anymore, but that still is one of my biggest identity things. And really, in the grand scheme of it, it should be down the list. But as athletes, so much of who we are, even when we get adulthood, links around it. And so when
It's
it's gone, it feels almost like you're naked.
yeah,
It's just very difficult.
right. Yeah. My friends at the MMA jiu-jitsu gym down in Clackamas, like it's tough
Mhm.
because combat sports are you can't socially distance
Yeah.
combat sports.
Yeah.
Um and so uh yeah, it it really if you didn't realize you don't realize how important it is to you, how
Mhm.
much your identity is tied up into something until it's
It's
gone.
gone. Well, even just people being able to be at the gym, you know, exercise is one of the best things for depression, right? And that disappeared. One of my friends who is a coach too, she would literally like say, she'd be like, numbers come out today. Well, I thought she was talking about college rankings. I'm like, no, they don't. They come out weekly. And she was talking about COVID numbers so she could go back to the gym. I go, when did a college coach care more about COVID numbers
Mm,
than ranking numbers? But that's where we're at, right? Because
yes.
without the gym, she was going crazy, right? And so I always laugh because when I got injured, I had to find a new identity. I couldn't be the athlete anymore, and I laughed that it was great. I was in Salt Lake City because they have a million hobbies in Salt Lake, like they're crafters to the upteenth, and so I can do every craft there is, which turns out great when you're a theater mom because you can paint anything and do anything. But for me, I had to build an identity when I wasn't planning on it. So I have learned so many
Mm.
different skills almost to replace the athletic skills I had because I
You
can't go
you
back and
didn't
play softball
choose
anymore.
you didn't choose it, but you
No,
had to adapt.
yes.
Yeah.
And the other thing is when you manage chronic pain, one of the key things is positive distractions. And so for me,
Mm,
like I always needed to have positive distractions in the way.
yeah. Yeah. Can you say a little bit more
About
about like
positive distractions?
yeah, and uh, just how chronic pain has affected you or how
Sure.
you see it affecting your athletes?
Sure. You know, chronic pain is also things they don't really talk about in the world of athletics. The only thing that I ever heard really when I was going through sports is that football players would physically kind of deteriorate at an earlier age, right? Because they're getting hit all the time. And I remember as I was getting closer to graduation, actually, one of my roommates who played left field, and she goes, I'm not working out for a year. I'm not doing anything for a year. My body hurts so much.
Mm,
And the grind that we put on our bodies as athletes, especially now that people specialize, that's why specializing, most trainers, most coaches don't recommend it because it puts so much of a grind on your body.
mm.
And so,
You mean specializing like in a sport, like
yeah,
a
right.
young athletes picking
Yes. Yep.
baseball or basketball?
Absolutely, because I was a three-sport athlete until my junior year, and I had very little medical stuff. And then when I got into college, I actually had a structural issue, but it came out because I was doing the same motions 10 months out of the year, right? I never
Mm,
had a break from those. But the thing
mm,
about chronic pain is it, you know, it's something that affects our mental health just as much as our physical health. And, you know, I chased therapists that could help with the mental side for so long and never really found a fit, because the science of pain is running so far behind,
mm.
and how to manage it and what you need to manage it, most to be honest, counselors and doctors don't know the answers to that. I've spent the last 20 years trying to figure out the science of pain, how it affects your brain. And yeah, I really wish I would have paid much closer attention in neuropsych when I was in school. I always say that I'm like, oh my gosh, why didn't I pay more attention in neuropsych?
Mm,
But for me, chronic pain has impacted every day of my life since I was 19 years old.
mm,
I have seen doctors all over the country. I have given up so much of my life to being in bed and recovering from, you know, just managing and trying to deal with chronic pain. I have not missed out on a lot of things because of chronic pain. And I feel in my practice, and when I've gotten to just focus on athletes in chronic pain and nerd out on pain, I have learned some things that can really impact and improve people's lives. And it's funny because when people come to me, I'm always like, I'm not going to cure you. If you're waiting for a cure, I don't have it. But I'm going to tell you how to manage your life and to manage your brain to get better. And so much of that is how we not control our thoughts, can't control our thoughts, but it's what we do after them, you know, after they come through.
yeah.
And when I left coaching, I coached collegiately for 15 years. And I finally decided, I was like, okay, I'm done with coaching. My body can't take it. It really wasn't where I wanted to be anymore. I wanted to be helping athletes in different ways. And I was like, this is the opportunity to change how you view pain. And I was going to have to change how I thought about things and even my relationship with God. And so my first about 18 months away from coaching, I really focused on how I was going to filter out a lot of the things in my thought process and hand over control to God, because I was kidding myself. Coaches love to control things. We are control freaks. I used to think if I could control 20-year-old girls, we would win. That's the stupidest thought ever. That's like saying, if I can control a bunch of 5-year-olds, this is going to be an easy day. Well, that's never going to happen, right? And so when I could really look at things as what is true is what is not true. What can I control? What can I not control? We talk about realms of control all the time in counseling, right? And everybody's like, wait, I only can control my reaction. And they think that's so small. And really it's massive, right?
It's everything.
So I have so many, like one of my favorite clients, she walked into my office at about 14, 15 years old, and she did not want to be there. Most athletes do not want to be in my office. I always say, who made you come? My mom, my girlfriend, my coach, whatever. She had chronic pain since she was 12 years old, and she was on the path to be a Division I volleyball player. And she has so much anxiety and thought so much about what people care about. And now she's getting ready to graduate. She's so amazing, such an amazing girl. She was always amazing. She just didn't realize it. But now she doesn't care what people think about her. She has learned to manage her anxiety so well that her pain is now totally functional. It was so dysfunctional, it almost crippled her through most of her early teens.
Her the mind body connection, her anxiety was playing out in her pain or making it.
Absolutely. And that's what people don't realize. So like athletes love to bottle things up. So many people bottle things up, and it can come out in your body. So I was talking to another counselor, and he asked me about chronic pain. He thought I was going to give him some exercises. I go, no, I'm not going to give you exercises like PT. No. But I told him, I said, your high anxiety and your like love of service is like throwing lighter fluid on your brain. So how you explain chronic pain? Usually it's that somebody's switch has been turned on, whether it be by serious injury, serious trauma, or illness. They're finding like mono can trip it, right? And that was my client. Mono tripped kind of her nervous system. For me, it was all my injuries. And so with that, it's like your electrical system is always on, and then you throw anxiety on top of it. It's just adding to the craziness and literally lighter fluid on a fire.
So like in that example, or when that happens, is it that your body, your nervous system creating more pain, or is it the perception of pain that you're dealing?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because so many people that go through chronic pain think my condition's getting worse, right? I need to go to a doctor.
Yeah, my pain's worse.
Yeah. So yeah, it's funny because my family will be like, do you need to see a doctor? I go, why? I've seen a million, and they all say the same thing. But what happens is, so we have all these grooves in our brain, and this is where, neuroplasticity comes in. It's kind of been the buzzword in counseling for the last couple of years. But really how it works is our pain just gets better at it. So it's like the Grand Canyon. The Grand Canyon did not start as a canyon. It was just rocks with some water. And as our pain gets better, or, gets worse, it's because it's digging deeper into like our brain.
That pathway is firing
all the time.
That pain pathway.
Yep.
And so it's just getting.
So that's why with clients, we train them to manage their anxiety and their thought process in a different way, so they don't have that pain going through all the time. So one of the cardinal sins of doctors, they always say, well, it's all in your head. And when my clients come to me, I know they hate that, because I hated that. And I'd say, so it's all in your head. And they look at me like, I'm going to fire you right now. Yeah. And I would say, it is in your head. I actually have a stuffed brain in my office. And so I bring it out and show them. I use some like these squishy things to show what is going with their nerve system. And then they go, oh my gosh. I said, yes, it's in your head. It's in your brain. How messaging and things are firing in your brain. You are not making this up. And yes, there may not be a disease, but your nervous system is reacting that way. And what they're finding is, it's like emotional trauma is the same thing. So like The Body Keeps Score, right? That's a really popular book that talks about it. One of the best books I've ever read is called Back in Control. And it was written by a spine surgeon in Seattle. And I thought it was going to be really sciencey. And I was like, okay, I'm ready to read this. And then I read it. I go, this isn't sciencey at all. But it actually talks about his journey through chronic pain. And his came from not ever dealing with abuse from his dad, but he's put in this whole big protocol
Mm.
working with his patients, and I use a lot of his stuff in my practice. Because that's thing is chronic pain people are always chasing the next thing, and with athletes, we struggle with pain all the time. And I was actually at College of Idaho working with their counselors and working with their athletic department, and I was talking to their school counselors, and we were talking about one of the major reasons that athletes use substances more than a regular student is because of pain, like physical pain.
Right.
And it's funny because people will ask me about opioids, and I will get on a big soapbox about opioids because 25% of all student athletes are prescribed opioids in their life. Me, definitely. I mean, in Salt Lake, they handed out Oxy like it was candy. And I came to find out why. Down the road, there's an amazing book called Dreamland, and it talks about the development of painkillers and how it ended up merging into the heroin epidemic. So, if you want some light reading, Dreamland it's actually amazing. It's fascinating.
Mm.
I think I'm too interested in cartels, but anyway, it links, but it links the pharma, like big
did
pharma,
did
to the
did you
cartels.
did so back then
Mhm.
they're handing it out like that's
Oh
the
yeah.
first thing that
Yep.
you're going to get prescribed or treatment.
Yes.
um did you have to struggle with the dependence
No,
or not?
I was lucky. I know that sounds weird, but because I was prescribed on a very high dose of medication through college because I couldn't sit. I couldn't go to class. Like my pain was so high. And
Hmm.
I sat with the doctor one time and I said, I don't want to go back on meds. And she's like, it's the only way you're going to be able to get through school because you can't literally sit down through school.
Hmm.
And so I was very, very specific about taking, like for me, I metabolize things pretty quickly, so it never really hit me the same. But one of my first internship was at the Salvation Army, and several of my clients were injured athletes that got hooked on opioids, and then they ended up in inpatient at Salvation Rehab. Right, I had a guy that was headed off to a Pac-12 school, broke his femur, and by the time he was 25, he had a $400 a day heroin habit. So for me,
Hmm.
that we were so willing to do this for our athletes, it has crippled so many, right? And the thing is when you have chronic pain, opioids don't help. Opioids help acute pain. They don't help chronic pain. So I've been off opioids for 4 or 5 years. I'm on a different type of medication, but they actually use medications that treat depression or seizures or they're anticonvulsants. So
Hmm.
they're treating the nervous system
Hmm.
um, instead of just like if you broke a leg, because as I say, it's a very slippery slope. And sometimes even now my mom goes, how did you not become an addict? I go, I was very, very careful. And I said, and I just don't think my body was, it just didn't, the dependency switch wasn't in there.
Hmm.
And so I was fortunate that I didn't have to go through that.
Yeah, that's great. So, Carrie, you work with athletes,
Mhm.
and so like athletes maybe from early on, they get the message that you just power through stuff,
Mhm.
you push through stuff.
Mhm.
So maybe uh they get to the unhealthy thing where they're like super motivated and they're not listening to their body,
Mhm.
or it's creating lots of anxiety.
Mhm.
I want to ask you about the other side of motivation.
Mhm.
My wife is a high school teacher, and we talk about kids that are struggling these days with maybe they're not pushing themselves too hard. They're not pushing themselves enough,
At
or
all.
at least
Mhm.
that's the parents
Mhm.
are struggling with. Like my son is checked out. They're just overwhelmed. They're not doing well with
Mhm.
online school. They're like it's just the, being on YouTube and video games is just taken over their
Mhm.
life. How do we help young people, or not just students, but like any young adults with um, doing what they need to do, like with
Mhm.
motivation if they're struggling with discipline or struggling with depression.
Well, and that's true across the board. I mean, I've seen honor students get 100 assignments behind, right? And
Wow.
that's one of the main things that is going through athletic departments right now is how do we keep training for nothing, right? There was no end line, there was no championship, and school's the same way.
Mm.
The thing that's funny about school that's different from athletics and pretty much different from anything else is you have to go to school for a long time to get the end result, right? You start when you're kindergarten, you don't get the end result until you graduate from high school. That's a lot of years. So to keep kids motivated, especially as teenagers, we're crazy to think that we are going to keep it motivated, right? And
Mm.
then we really say you better go 4 more years if you really are going to get the carrot, right? So I always tell with kids, I go, guys, I know it's hard to stay motivated because you have 4 more years till you get the payoff from school, but we break down of what they are gaining every year from every assignment, what they are gaining from that experience. And one of the things with school right now is I think the teachers are struggling with staying on their A game, and then so are the students, which rightfully so. We're not built to do school, to do life this way.
Yeah.
So one of the things with my clients is I really focus on trying to keep as strong of a schedule as they possibly can, because that's the thing is we're falling out of schedules. Like if I didn't have clients, I would never know what time it was ever, right? Through the first couple of months of COVID, I would fall asleep at 4 a.m. It was becoming an issue because it seemed like time didn't exist and there
Oh
was
yeah.
nothing to look forward to. So what are we getting excited from?
Yeah.
And the other thing is video games and YouTube, it lets us escape into a fake reality, not the reality we're in. And that's why I think with these kids, it's okay, let's get on a schedule and stay on that schedule as much as you can. And yes, are there stupid assignments that you don't want to do? Yeah, but even in the workplace, there are things that we don't want to do in the workplace, right?
Right.
But they're the necessary things. And one of the things I talk to our clients too is I know that you don't want to do these assignments, but what you are doing is you're trying to learn as much as you can and become the best problem solver, the best communicator, the best researcher. And these are the things that can help you along the way. And I know with parents, I think it's hard to keep on top of your kids when they're doing online. I get it. You're working full time. You're probably raising other kids and you're trying to keep them online. But that's the thing about have a schedule, have a check-in at the end of the day saying, hey, how was school? Even though I know they didn't go to school,
Mm.
how was school? What,
Yeah.
what are you still responsible for? And create as much of a normal life as you can, right? I find my family doesn't sit at the table probably as much as we used to. And we live a very normal COVID life because I go to work, my husband goes to work, and our kids are actually in school. But we need to create those routines because that is where a lot of the motivation of, okay, I'm going to get up. And that's another thing. When you get up, change your clothes. Do not wear your pajamas to online school. Okay. And you're like, that's stupid. That's the best thing about online school. No, I always think of it this way. Like even when I was an athlete or when I was a coach, when the uniform came on, it was game time. It was ready to roll. Like even as a
Yes.
coach,
It
I'd get
changes
dressed
your
in the
mindset. It changes your
totally.
energy.
It totally does. And
Yeah.
I would like put on my coaching stuff and I'm like, you're not playing. But I'm like, but it's go time. And that's the thing is, if you're just lounging around, how much more difficult is it to get that motivation? It's
Yeah.
not game on. If you haven't showered in 3 days just because they can't smell you through Zoom, the mentality hasn't changed of it is time to go to work. It is
Yeah.
time to go do these things.
Right.
The other thing too is find something to do, even if you think it's ridiculous, right? Like find hobbies that you may have never thought of. And so many kids, even, young adults are like, well, I wasn't good at it right away. Well, name one thing that anybody was good at right away. Like, do you think that LeBron was a genius at basketball at like 4 years old? Maybe, I know Tiger was amazing, but we
Yeah.
all are going to struggle through things. But this is a time that we finally got the world to stop, and we didn't take advantage of it, right? So many of us wanted the
And we're
world to
not
stop,
done. We're not
and we're not
done.
done.
We're
And
not done.
we're not taking advantage of it. So I always look at kids too and say, what do you want to look back at COVID and said, I did this, this, and this. I learned this. I was able to achieve this. I was able to get my grades up instead of letting them slide, right? And so that's the thing is there is still motivation through COVID. Like I said, I got done with well, not done, but I'm actually on a break right now because I just got done with my second season of my podcast. And I really wanted to get back into speaking because that's, to be honest, speaking about athletes and mental health is like my favorite thing to do.
Yes.
And so I got involved with this thing called Speakers Lab. So now I'm back into training to do that because whenever the doors open, I'm ready to go.
Mm.
And that's the thing is these kids' motivation should be, this will come to an end. And am I going to be ready or not? Because so many kids are not going to be ready to go back into school.
Right. Right.
And so many kids are like, I don't want to go back to school. So you got to start taking the steps back to this life will end at some point in time and we will go back into some form of community.
Yeah. I think Since we're talking athletics,
Yeah.
I think just as you're saying that, we can't just flip the switch. The
No.
schools open up. You can't flip the switch from 14 hours, 18 hours on screens to interacting with live people,
Hmm.
looking them in the eyes.
Hmm.
Um, but developing like um, small steps.
Hmm.
Don't throw them into the deep end of the pool.
Hmm.
It's just like with athletic skills. It's like you drill, you isolate. You don't
Yeah,
just
you don't go
throw
run
them
a
in.
marathon after spending, almost a year on the couch, right? And that's the thing is even with athletics, especially like the young guys that are just getting back to it, it's, you know what? Say, hey, let's go play catch today. Hey, let's go hit today. My son who if as long if he lived like in Arizona, he would never come in the house. He would be playing all the time. He played a basketball tournament and then he's like, hey mom, you want to go hit? And I'm like, okay. And then, hey, we got up and went on a bike ride. But that's the thing is this really has been a time that you can going outside is always something that you can do, right? And so you can still be training. Yes, there's not the end result, but here's the kicker about athletics. We are so focused on results, winning championships, all American scholarships, contracts, right? That's what we all do it for. When's the last time a pro athlete said, I got up today just to play basketball because it's so fun? You know, I have that conversation with my high level athletes all the time that it's their job. And I'm like, okay, but I know you love your sport. And they'll be like, oh, yeah, I do love it. It's a secondary thought. COVID has actually given these kids an opportunity to play just for the sake of enjoying their sport and getting better,
to
right?
for play,
Yeah, for
not
play,
just
right?
competition, but
Exactly.
yeah,
And
for
I'd
fun.
always say in the world of athletics, like for me, so in softball world, you have a fall season. That's not, I mean, doesn't count, but you play games and stuff. And then you have end of October, November, early December. And athletes hate that time because it's lifting weights and hitting off a tee and they hate it.
Through the holidays,
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
training.
they just hate that time
I see.
because it's boring, right? But that's
Just
when
doing the skills.
they
Yeah.
get better then. They don't get
Mm,
better when they're playing games. They get better in the boring time.
mm,
And so many athletes didn't look at this as, wow, I get life to slow down and I could get so much better.
mm.
Because honestly, how many teenagers think of life that way? They don't. I mean, most adults don't think it that way. But even
Right.
though this has slowed down, you can make the best of this opportunity if it's I'm going to improve my game. I'm going to improve my mental game. That was my biggest kick when COVID hit is I thought my phone would be ringing off the hook. And well, it was because of everybody's depression and anxiety. But I was like, this is the time that you can work on your mental
But
game.
you didn't want to just respond to your clients. You wanted to develop as a person,
Well, yeah,
or professionally too.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so many athletes could have been working on their mental game through this.
Mm,
And as you get to be a higher level athlete, the mental game is more crucial. Lots of people don't think that, but that's the thing is the very best athletes, the mental side is what separates them
mm,
more than just the physical side.
yeah.
But it's kind of, I was just like, everybody, we could be working on mental game, but nobody chose to look at that. They just kind of disappeared from their sports,
Mm,
right? And
mm,
now they're having to adjust to life still playing in COVID. What will life ever look like? Will I get recruited? Will I be as good? So all the anxiety things that athletes had, and the world of sports is a very high level anxiety environment because it's always, what if I'm not successful, right? So I think as COVID goes on, it's all how we look at this time. I can use this time to get better at my individual skill, to also work on my mental game, to also maybe start getting involved with things that help separate my identity from just sports, right? When athletes
mm.
come in, they're almost embarrassed to tell me that they have different hobbies, and I love it when they tell me they're into other things. Like I have an athlete I work with, she's an amazing artist. Oh my gosh, she painted something for my office and I like just stare at it going, how did a 13-year-old do that, right? But she wants to be a collegiate volleyball player. I used to there was an athlete at Concordia, he was an all-American thrower, like this huge kid. He was a classically trained violinist, right?
Yeah.
And I love that because I always knew once he left sports, he was more than just his event, right?
Well rounded.
He was well rounded.
That's the thing about like amazing athletes, like that are like a high level.
Mm-hmm.
It's like because of their discipline, and they know how to train and
Mm-hmm.
practice and drill and be focused. and stick to stuff, they also develop all these like amazing skills or talents in other areas. It's just like, how is that fair? Like you're awesome at like multiple things, you know?
Well, it's funny because I'll tell people sometimes, I go, God only hands out so much talent. You don't get to be, an Oxford scholar and a pro athlete and like, create world peace and cure cancer. Like you're only going to get so much. But yeah, you do see those athletes. You're like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
How much talent can be put into one human being? Yeah.
Yeah. I want to go back to Speaker Lab.
Yeah.
So you're tell me a little bit about that, and
Yeah.
like what is the message, or what are you passionate about
That's
speaking
always
with
that's always
audiences?
been a hard thing for me to narrow down, even when it was figuring out niche markets for counseling. It's always been hard because I'm interested in a lot. But yeah, I used to speak for the WIA quite a bit, which is like the governing body of high school sports. Before COVID, I went out to College of Idaho, and this was the best thing. I had two good friends that coach there, and I know their AD, and I got to come in and work with teams one-on-one. So the coach, I sit down with the coach, and they say, this is what we're struggling with, and we meet with the teams. And I would meet with their athletic director and their school counselors, and I do one-on-one counseling if they wanted to. But then I got to go spend 90 minutes with all the kids in the athletic department, and that's like the best, because I know when I'm speaking, I feel like I'm individually talking to everyone in that room, even though there's 450 of them, right? And the main message was that the value of mental health support in the world of athletics, and really why it's such a necessity, and how it improves just like kind of their overall well-being, but also their performance, right? Because so many people ask me, oh, you're a sports psychologist. I'm like, no, I'm not a sports psychologist. I'm a counselor that specializes in athletics. And the thing is what I've learned through all this is you have to be okay with all your stuff to perform better, right? If you're not okay with your stuff and all the things that are going in your life, you're not going to perform at your utmost. And usually it's been the other way. We're just going to cover up, we're just going to focus on the performance and not what's underneath.
Compartmentalize it.
Yeah. And it doesn't really work that way. And especially with the newer generation of athletics, it doesn't really work that way. So that's kind of been my main focus, is like getting out in front of athletes and saying, this is the value you're going to get from it. These are some of the things that it can change in your life. And like, I focus probably on the three major concepts of anxiety, depression, and suicide, because those are probably the biggest things that athletics deal with, especially the anxiety side. I mean, talking with my friends at University of Oregon, I mean, it's a Fortune 500 company. U of O puts millions of dollars into sports, so the pressure is very high. So giving them an understanding what counseling is, and also taking that stigma away. Like I said, when I was growing up, you didn't talk about going to counseling. I never told people I was going to counseling. Now I'm like, you should have a counselor. Like, are you serious? Like, you're a professional athlete and your brain is controlling your body. You should have one of these people.
It was really cool when I saw like LeBron James on the Calm YouTube channel and the Calm app, and he talks about how using Calm and learning mindfulness and practicing relaxation and meditation improved his performance.
Oh, absolutely.
And he's very mentally tough. And yeah.
Well, and those skills, like mindfulness, and it's funny because when I say mindfulness to a group of athletes, they think I'm going to make them do yoga or something, and they it's almost like they just pull away from it. And I actually started using like old school Frogger to explain it to them. Like, okay,
the video game.
Yeah. So I would bring it out, and they're just like, they think that's hilarious. But I'm like, okay, you if you just rush ahead, you're going to get squashed or eaten by an alligator, right? So you really have to wait and focus on the semi in front of you or the cars in front of you. And that was a little bit more understandable for them, even though I should work for Headspace, because I advertise for them all the time, because it breaks down what mindfulness is in such a great way. Because as athletes, we're told to relax. Worst thing to ever say to an athlete is relax. Or you just need to clear it out of your head. Well, we all know that you cannot clear your head completely. It's impossible. So these are some things that really do give you quality skills. As I say, like a Calm or a Headspace, if you aren't working with a counselor. I called a buddy of mine, and he was one of the top relievers in the Pac-12 when he was in school. I go, oh my gosh, Paris, I figured this thing out today. And we were talking about the cycle of anxiety and depression in athletes. And I go, this is really what the zone is. It's not what we all thought it was. And he goes, where were you when I was in college? I go, where was I? I was a head case. Like, it'd have been so great if I could have just learned those basic skills of staying present. And to be honest, that's not what we were being taught or educated about in our mental
to
stuff.
get into that flow state,
Yeah.
and not overwhelmed by anxiety.
Yeah.
And
not living in the what if land and focusing on really what is in front of us. You know, I think there were words out there, but they weren't as tangible and usable, I think, for athletes as they can be now. And so I think that's one of the big things for athletes is, but it does take training, right? I used to have this little 12U softball team, and we'd do 1 minute at a time, right? Because 1 minute of mindfulness, when you have never done it, it seems like a lot.
It's an eternity.
It's an eternity, right?
Yeah.
And I know as counselors, we've learned to be mindful all the time. We have to be present with our clients and stuff. So we're trained. But I remember the first couple times I did sessions, oh my gosh, that was torture. It was awful. But now it's just second nature.
You were probably, it was a little bit of a transition from coach, 15 years of coaching to.
Yeah, just sitting and being present. Honestly, it's funny because I don't do things very traditionally. I definitely, you can tell I'm a coach when I'm in session, but I know, but the 55 minutes, yes, I can sit there and be present for 55 minutes. But for athletes, it takes a minute at a time. But with athletes, the mentality is, I have to be better now. And so for them, there's a lot of impatience instead of, this is a skill that you can be learning. And once again, this is something that athletes could be learning through COVID that is going to put them so much further ahead once they get out of it. You know, it's funny. I was talking to my 10-year-old, and he had tryouts today. He's going to play for me. I don't know what anyway, he's so nervous. And we were talking about, buddy, you can't control about what people think. You can only focus on the skill at hand. And my daughter, same thing with auditions and all those things. It's like, you can only control these certain things, and you can't control what people think about. So let's just be present. You can't worry about what part you're going to get. You have no control over that.
Show up and do your best.
Yeah, exactly.
That's your part of it.
Yep. Yeah. And so I spent a lot of time with athletes working, helping them break the failure and what if I make a mistake again, and how that just cycles around the zone. So we work a lot about how do we get these thoughts out of your head and the cycle to stop and get you more into the zone all the time. And I always tell them, the zone doesn't just land on us. LeBron doesn't have more zones flying over his head that land on him, right? Michael Phelps doesn't have more zones. They are better at training their brain to be present. That's what sets them apart. I mean, yes, they won the genetic lottery. Let's get real. Like, even if I was the best mind controller of myself, I'm not Michael Phelps. Let's, be real. But that is what separates the, good athletes to the great ones, and the great ones for being, Hall of Famers.
Yeah. And that's what I think that the principle of being present and mindful, that's something that non-athletes can use with dealing with anxiety and the places that they need to show up. Can you share a little bit more what we mean by the zone?
Absolutely.
For folks that might not be familiar with it.
No, it's funny because because even my non-athletes are always like, yeah, I know what the zone is, but I know that people feel that no matter what they do. Like everybody feels that in their place of work or even in their relationship or whatever. But the zone is, for athletes, it's like, for a softball player, it's like the ball looks ginormous, right? Like there's nothing I can't hit. For basketball players, I've been told that, the hoop looks huge, and so everything's going to go in. It's the point in your life when everything seems so much easier than it ever does otherwise, right? And what the zone really is when you are truly present in whatever activity you are doing. And so it's interesting when we even talk to each other, right? So I know there's so many conversations that one person is not present because, that happens probably more than not. A, because of this cell phone, and B, because we're just not actively listening. And so many people, I'll say, do you feel heard? And so many people will say, no, I don't feel heard. Right. And so it's the same thing about being in the zone for any performance. It's like, if I am halfway there, I'm never going to be in that zone. Right. And so, and I always explain it kind of as 3 boxes. So you have your box that is the past. That's where depression lives, right? It's failure, trauma, frustrations. Those are kind of the 3 keys in that box. And then there's the zone box, which is the now, like the present. And then there's the other box that is the future, which is where anxiety lives, which is the what if land. And athletes love to live in what if land. Actually, humans just love to live in what if land because we all have control problems. But usually we focus on the traumas, the failures, the frustrations, and we don't want them to happen again, right? Nobody wants to feel pain again. So we jump past the zone and go, well, what if it happens again?
Yeah.
Right? What if I make this mistake and they fire me? Right? What if my, this happens and my spouse leaves me? I mean, those are pretty significant, but
Yeah.
for athletes, it could be like, if I strike out again, coach is going to put me on the bench.
Right. We
So we don't live.
start paralyzing,
Yes.
not taking that risk because we're protecting ourselves from failure.
And so that, yes, we're so protective of that, or letting go of control, failure and letting go of control. We don't like to do those things as human beings, but that keeps us from just being in the present. I can't control what is going to happen in 5 seconds. I can't. Like, I think I can't. No, I can't. I mean, my computer could crash and, or somebody could call me and say, you know what, this emergency happened. I can't control that. Right. All I can control is being present with you and having a real conversation. Because if I'm thinking about what I'm making for dinner, that doesn't make me the best speaker or the best guest for you. Same thing like with being a therapist. If I'm thinking about, the argument I had with somebody earlier, what a disservice I'm doing for my client, right? Same thing for ourselves. If we're always focused on the past and the future, what a disservice we're doing to ourselves, because we never just get to enjoy being in the moment, right?
Yeah.
That's why the holidays are horrible. We always focus on, well, my mother-in-law was awful, so what if that happens again? I'm going to do everything I can to make my house spotless and the best present and whatever. And so we ruin so many great periods of time in our life because we are so afraid of repeating the past and living in the what if. And I know for me, and this is funny, linking how that performance and the zone impacts chronic pain. It's the exact same thing. Higher anxiety leads to more pain, right? It acts, as I say, it makes our nervous system react at a higher level. So for me to be truly the lowest pain level I can be, I have to be as present as I can. So God must have known something really genius, of course he did, and put me in the line of work that forces me to be present all the time. And I have learned to carry it into my everyday. I actually had explained to my mom about, I choose not to be around certain people. It's not because I don't love people. I love people, but some people push me way more into the anxiety level and my body can't take it. Right. So that's the thing is if people put me in the what if land, I don't want to be around those people. And
Your
it's not
body
because,
your body not only keeps score, it has radar for
oh yeah, it's
unhealthy
like,
people,
yeah,
stressful
I'll have
people.
something. That's why I'm like, oh, it's Christmas. I don't know how I'm going to handle this, so I know I'm like, I know how your body makes me react. And so I have to be cautious, which is funny because I think my mom just took it as, well, you're just kind of being a jerk. No, I'm not. Like, I love people, but I know that person could put me into a pain flare that keeps me away from doing all the things I value and taking care of my clients and my family. And so I have to choose.
And enjoying the people that you actually do enjoy hanging out
right.
with.
And so for me, I always have to focus on, how is what I'm doing in my current life going to impact my next one? But it's that being in the zone. I have to stay away from the depression or the sadness or the frustration. I have to stay away from the what if land to be physically as at peace as I can be. Same thing with performers. It's the same skill set. And like you said, it really serves every human being, because if you sat and asked 100 of your clients, do they feel that they are truly present in their relationships? I bet maybe 2 would say yes out of 100. I mean, I can't even think of anybody right now. Okay, I think I'm married to somebody that has very low anxiety and depression. So, but most people in my world, their anxiety is so high.
Right.
And every chronic pain person I have met fits into that category. I've never met a chill chronic pain person. But chronic pain actually causes the anxiety. What if I never get better? What if this is how life is going to be all the time? What if my doctor tells me I'm crazy? All those what ifs. And I think for me, I just am past them. What if what? Like, I get hit by a truck tomorrow too. So if I worry about all those things and the what ifs, I don't get to enjoy the where I'm at now. And for me, with pain, that's the best way that I have to live. So I choose that.
Yeah. And you've had lots of practice choosing and setting those what ifs aside for someone who's like really swimming in the anxiety. It takes time, it takes coaching, it takes counseling.
Yes.
It's hard to
Yeah.
do it on your own when you're in the
Yes.
middle of it.
Yes.
Um, so Carrie, this has been such an awesome conversation. It's been good to hear about the work that you do with athletes.
Mhm.
Is there anything that you want to share or promote as we wrap up our time?
Self-promotion. I'm really bad at that, but because I'm always like wanting to promote everybody else. Honestly, my podcast, Training the Complete Athlete, the big focus has been all these conversations that athletes haven't been able to have or coaches haven't had, that are so real in our lives, from depression and identity to, as coaches, what should be our focus in developing people, things from suicide, mentorship, everything. As I say, it's all the things outside of the statistics. And I think that's really why I got into counseling, honestly, is I had all these athletes at Concordia sit on my couch, and I was happy to be their therapist because they wouldn't go to counseling. They wouldn't go to the counseling center. And then they started coming to me with way bigger things. And I was like, okay, now I need to go back to school. But I wanted a place that they could feel like they weren't alone. And I think that's what my podcast is focused is. I don't want them to feel like they're the only one that is going through this stuff, because weakness is not a highly acceptable mentality in athletics. And so for me, that's what I wanted for them is, you're not alone through this. This is all very difficult. And what we ask of athletes or any high performers, because as I say, I see it in so many different avenues, is more than probably the average person should ever withstand. And I don't want them to feel like they have to have it all figured out on their own, because it's impossible.
Yeah.
So
for anyone who's listening and dealing with chronic pain or anxiety, I hope you take the courageous step to deal with it, to learn these skills, to connect with who you need to connect with. With Carrie's story, she tracked down the help she needed, and she you can tell Carrie is a bulldog and just determined. She's gonna like chase people down until she gets what she needs. Uh, and I know when you're depressed, when you're overwhelmed, when you don't have the energy, chronic fatigue and chronic pain go together. It's hard to have the energy to do that. So if you need to, ask for help, and hope you take the next best step in your life. Carrie mentioned a ton of resources, a few books, and her podcast. I'm going to put those links in the show notes. Thanks again, Carrie, for
you bet.
this conversation, and look forward to seeing more on your podcast, and then also you're speaking when you're out there doing it.
Yeah, when we finally get back to the stage, yes, it will be great.
Yeah. All right. Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.